No, we're going to open up with our third episode of the Beatles in surround sound, and we're going to be emphasizing, changing the title, that these are actually not the surround sounds that are out legitimately now. By the way, I'm your host, Glenn Fleetwood. And it's really important to understand that we're going to only be discussing for a scholarly purpose the surround sounds that are not currently available. And I know that means that most people don't know about them, haven't heard about them. But as we've mentioned earlier, the story is in sometime just after 2000, the Beatles, and by that I mean it was Ringo, Paul, I think it was right after George passed, so it was Olivia and Yoko, were asked or invited or whatever to come into Abbey Road to their beautiful recording studio with its B&W speakers, those great speakers they've got there. I think they're called 802s or something. And they were to listen to the surround sound mixes that had been done by Abbey Road. Without any fanfare, this was done. They just said, look, this surround sound is catching on. Everybody's getting rich doing it. By this way you can resell all your old albums for $25, $35 an album. That's what most SACDs that were going for then, the ones that were good and had a separate multi-channel track. So they said, look, we can resell the entire Beatles catalog to almost all Beatles listeners because everybody's getting surround sound in their house. And so listen, here's what we've done. And I don't know how much they played, but I do know that they had actually redone for surround sound all of the Beatles albums that they had. By that I mean original albums. So they did not go back into things like oldies but goldies and other things like the Red Album and the Blue Album and the Beatles ballads and the Beatles movies and every other rip-off that they've made trying to resell the same old stuff. But they thought this way we can get the people to buy it again. Now, that was in direct contradiction to a secret legal agreement that the Beatles had all made and that is supposedly still in effect. And that is that after the third album came out, the collection, they said that they were not going to any longer put out anything but the Beatles albums as they sounded in the period of the 60s when they came out. In other words, they made some deadline in 2000, and they just said, from now on, every album, we may improve the sound quality, but what comes out of the speakers is going to be exactly the same thing that you purchased in 1967, but, possibly with better sound. That was legit, but no changing anything. And this was a horrendous decision, just an awful, stupid decision, because there are some things that can be repaired quite easily in the Beatles catalog. I think the easiest one is to look at the rubber sole and say, what would it take to just remix it so that it's a great album? I know some people are saying, well, it already is a great album. No, it could have been a great album, but that mix with the voices on the right and the instruments on the left is ridiculous. And it was ridiculous at the time. So that decision by the Beatles to make that, remaining Beatles and their estates, to make that agreement that no more albums were going to be coming out in a different format or in a different sonic format. Can we say that? All right. So, in contravention of that agreement, Abbey Road, on their own, said, look, we're going to mix the Beatles albums into surround sound. And we're going to play them for you, and you can listen to them. And they were certain that the sound quality and the work they put into it would prompt Ringo, Paul, and Yoko and Olivia to say, oh, that's nice. Okay. Yeah, let's release that. Well, when the Beatles came in, and by Beatles, well, I'm not going to each time go through the list again, but when they came in and they listened to it, they said, that's horrible. That is truly horrible. And to a large extent, they were right, because Abbey Road engineers foolishly played the tapes in chronological order, which means they started with Please Please Me, and there's not much you can do with Please Please Me because it's generally a 2-channel recording. Now, a lot has been done that you can now take a channel that is monaural, or let's call it a single channel, and by using computer programs, you can extract an instrument out of it, okay? Well, but it's not refined to where you can use that system and come up with 5 channels. So they had to revert to some of the old but horrible temptations of, well, what if we put all the bass in this channel and all the treble in that channel? And it just was a mess. But nonetheless, I'm going to review it, and we'll listen, maybe do a couple of quick passages, and we'll talk about why it is that it failed the test so miserably. That is basically where we're at today, but I'm going to be going through each of the albums that were remixed for surround sound by Abbey Road, give you a description of them, give you my opinion of the album. The one thing I will not be doing is telling you where to go buy them. First of all, I don't know, but the second is I'm not going to be in any way antagonizing Abbey Road and trying to sell these multi-channel, even though they were legitimately mixed, but they were not released to the public. And so if I knew where the stand was that somebody is standing on the corner selling these things, I guess they would be in super audio compact disc format or something, or you would not get that information from me. So, but I will talk to you about what it sounds like. There's some things in there that really do wake it up. I was listening today to the first album, and by first album to me, that means I look at Meet the Beatles as, or as they say, With the Beatles as the first one, but they count Please Please Me as the first one. And believe it or not, that thing, although it's supposed to have been recorded 2-track, I hear some more tracks there, because I was listening to I Want to Hold Your Hand. And believe me, maybe it's just a quirk of the recording, but all of the pounding music is in the rear channels in these mixes. I'm talking about the mixes that are still locked up in the vaults in Abbey Road. But the surround sound that I heard from I Want to Hold Your Hand was really interesting because it had the voices in the front, and I've heard things I've never heard. I did not realize how well these guys harmonized on that song, and it made me think, I don't even think people can do that. That may be some sort of trick that George Martin pulled, because their singing is just... It's almost as if the two voices make one, meld into one. That's the right word, I think. And it's just astounding. But in the mix that I have here, the voices are in the front channel along with Paul McCartney's bass. Now, wait a minute. They didn't record back. Well, I don't know, but it sure as hell is. And it's not, I can detect at this point, because it's still not a great science. I can detect if it's something where they just put a low-pass filter and brought the bass through from another channel and loped it on there. No. This is a full-range bass guitar with that beautiful Hofner violin bass is the right name. We do call it the Beatle bass, though, don't we? And the Beatle bass, and it's right up there in the front channel with John and Paul singing. I think George at particular parts too. So I Want to Hold Your Hand has a stereo rear, which has all of those guitars and George Martin's persistent organ, which really is what drives the song. I hate to say that. But, I think if you saw it live, which I've seen them live, but I don't think they played that song, that you would miss that organ, because that organ is what pushes that song. Anyway, that is in stereo in the rear channels, including George Martin's organ and the guitars of John, George, and, of course, Ringo's drumming. So that's in stereo in the back. And in the front, you've got John and Paul singing, but also a beautiful full-range bass. Now, what that also means is that somebody during the mixing of this particular, can we call it an album? During the album, forgot that you always, on the bass guitar, you always cut the high end. Bass guitars aren't supposed to be full range. They're recorded full range, so it gives you all sorts of options on how to make them sound when you make the album, when you mix it down. But you're supposed to, before you lay it down on the album that's for sale to the people, whatever format you're using, you use a high-end filter so that the bass guitar goes boom, 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 and doesn't sound like just a regular guitar playing too low for its own good. Well, they didn't do that here. Whoever did this forgot to cut the bass, so it sounds full range, which on Paul's Beatle bass actually sounds pretty damn good. But it also, if you listen to it, you'd be surprised at how arty a piece he is playing. He is not just playing along with the bass. He's playing a piece that it almost sounds like he's reading a note chart. So that's what we've got, and we'll go over that next week when we get up to with the Beatles. But this week we're on Please Please Me, so let's dive into it, shall we? All right. Hard to say anything negative about an album that starts off with I Saw Her Standing There. But besides it being a great song and having the count-in actually from take 9 flown in to, I think that's take 2. So, all right. But if you were here in the studio with us, you would hear that the vocals, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4 come out of the rear channel, but then the singing when it starts comes out of the front and center. The music comes out of the left rear mostly, but